I'm so thrilled to be chatting with you two today because we've had so many conversations with CCRM doctors and specialists and other guests about infertility and everything that we need to do in order to get these little babies. But the one big thing that's been missing is the financial aspect of it and how difficult that can be and how costly that can be. So I'm thrilled to have you on to give everybody a little bit of an education into that. But first, why don't we start by having you just introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you do in this world.
I am Dr. Sheeva Talebian. I am a reproductive endocrinologist, fertility specialist at CCRM at the New York location. And I am the director of third party there. So I basically sort of do a lot of donor egg, donor sperm, surrogacy work, but also I'm a full fertility doctor. I've been doing this since 2008. So egg freezing, IUI, IVF, all of that. That's my day-to-day, every day.
Okay, amazing. All right.
And I am Naman Desai. I'm the head of product at Future Family. So we are a lender focused specifically on fertility care to help make these procedures more affordable and more palatable. Part of my job is to really help clinics innovate and understand how we can provide more thoughtful financing options to consumers or patients as they go through this process to remove that element of stress. And then we also have a care team that I manage. So these are fertility nurses that have worked in fertility clinics for years and years. They now work with Future Family, and our patients our borrowers. They have access to our care team. So in the evenings, if they have questions or one-off things that they want to chat about, it's a great complement to the care experience that they get in the fertility clinics themselves.
What would someone need in order to be able to get your funding?
So it's not too dissimilar from the type of loan or the process that you might go through for like an auto loan, but it's actually extremely fast. So it's much faster than that. You go through about a 90-second online application. We basically do a soft credit pull. We understand your FICO score, your income. And from there, we can give you a pre-approval. Again, like the vast majority of our consumers actually just do this online from their phones. It's that easy. It's that fast. Once you get a pre-approval, you're able to chat with some of our account executives who can better help you understand the size of loan to take out. And they're experts in fertility financing. And so they'll take a look at your treatment plan and some of the approximate costs that your clinic might have quoted to you and help shape the right loan package for your needs. And that includes medication and other types of testing through pharmacies or other ancillary providers, anesthesia as well. And so they really help you customize a loan to your needs. And then we offer loans anywhere from 12 months to 60 months. So, it's really based on you and what you want to be able to do and your financial situation and cash flows. And if you want to pay it off faster, totally cool. If you want to pay it off over 60 months, also perfect.
Right.
Most of our borrowers, they take out loans for 60 months. It just makes sense that, your monthly payments are more palatable.
Right.
And to the extent that you go through more than one cycle, you can take out a second or third loan, et cetera. And again, that's just like, it makes it a lot more, it opens up the opportunity for a lot more folks to go through this process.
Of course. I didn't know such a company existed. I think that we're also overwhelmed and we get such sticker shock and then we don't necessarily know, and this is why exactly we're doing this podcast, that there are companies like that out there that can make it more palatable and accessible and possible for us to do all this. But I feel like we should really get into like the actual hard costs, like what kind of money are we actually talking about here? So it varies depending on what you want to do. There's egg freezing, IUI, IVF, donor egg, donor sperm, adoption, surrogacy, all these things range in pricing. So let's start from like the initial egg freezing, which is what I think, so many women are looking to do in their 20s when income is not at our highest, So just simple egg freezing cost. What is that?
So it could vary, but I would say, and it also on geographic location. What city do you live in?
Right.
But I would roughly say approximately $10,000 for the treatment and a year of storage.
Okay.
That does not include the medications. Medications could be separate, anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 on top of that.
Okay.
I would say that's sort of an average ballpark. For egg freezing.
So 10 to 15,000.
10 to 15 if you had zero coverage.
Right. Okay. And then IUI and IVF.
So again, it depends with the IUI, medicated. But again, I think I would say approximately for an IUI cycle, roughly $2,000.
Okay.
Approximately. And then IVF can vary because there are different forms of IVF.
Right.
From, IVF with a fresh embryo transfer to IVF with chromosomal screening of an embryo, which entails freezing it and then doing a frozen embryo transfer. And again, IVF, I would quote somewhere from 15 to 30 in terms of like depending on what needs to be done and what different adjuncts.
Right. And that's just for one time. So
exactly.
Just after 1, 2, 3 times, you're talking, you're easily getting to, like 6 digits after 6 months of trying, So what about then like adoption and surrogacy? Because those are 2 different situations.
Right. So surrogacy also, I would say, can range as well. You need IVF to do surrogacy.
Exactly.
Right? So you have to get your embryos first. So there's that part of it, which we just kind of referenced and how many rounds of that. But then the surrogate aspect itself, I would say at this point, $75,000 to $150,000 probably, depending on, how it's done and the various aspects of it.
Right.
And then adoption, I can't really speak to, but
yeah, that can range anywhere. I think generally what we've seen is about $100,000 to about $200,000. A lot of it is legal fees.
Okay,
there's a lot of legal fees that get tied up in that process.
Same thing with surrogacy as well.
Same thing with surrogacy, because
similar price range, I would say. Similar when you add in the IVF, I would say similar.
Right. Interesting. Okay. And then the egg donor and the sperm.
Right. So egg donor can also vary. There are now egg banks where they're frozen, where you can purchase a handful for, $20,000 to $30,000, similar to an IVF.
Okay.
And then there's the fresh route where the donor undergoes like a fresh extraction and the recipient gets all those eggs. And that's, sometimes via an agency, which has costs too. And that could be anywhere, I would say, 30 to significantly higher, depending on sometimes the donor, depending on their degree of education, may request higher compensation. So that can vary as well, for sure. And then sperm banks as well exist. So, fertility clinics are not sperm banks. There are many sperm bank options. And I will say, just in my years as a fertility doctor from 2008 to the current time, vials of sperm used to be a couple $100 a vial, and now they're well over $1,000 a vial, one vial.
Wow.
So that price has gone up significantly as well. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So when a patient comes to you and is having some financial insecurity about the whole situation, but wants to move forward, what is the conversation that you have with them, and what is the first step that they should take to get any kind of assistance or know what their options are?
Right. So first off, there is understanding what their employer offers as a benefit, right? And I think a lot of people, it took me a long time to realize it's not the insurance company, is what is the employer offering as a fertility benefit. So one, do you have a fertility benefit through your health insurance? And 2, what does it cover? What does it entail? And then, and do you have to go to certain clinics versus not?
Right.
So there's that component of it. But there are still many, smaller businesses that just offer no benefit whatsoever. And you could probably speak to that.
Yeah.
And so, that becomes, obviously, this could become a huge financial obstacle for many, many people, right? When we just heard the numbers we're speaking about. And so I think that's where it's like, okay, let's kind of partner together and figure this out, right? Whether it's egg freezing, whether it's you need to do IVF or, whatever the treatment is, let's find a path forward together and figure out how to make it reasonable and not another huge stress on top of a stress already that's there, right? And I think there are creative ways to do it. For, like you said, women in their 20s who want to freeze, if their employer doesn't offer the benefit, let's talk about ways of saving and and there's loans now, which is amazing.
Right. So is that something that then you would direct someone to, like a firm like this?
Right.
That
exactly.
Okay. Right. And then tell me how you step into the game.
Yeah. So so many of the patients that we work with come to us from fertility clinics and CCRM.
Yeah.
And we kind of get introduced to them through that channel. And then we have our applicants kind of at the early stage of their process with us. They fill out a very quick online application that I'd mentioned. From there, we really get hands-on with them. So we have a team of, fertility finance specialists that will chat over the phone, even a couple of times, to really bring comfort to the experience and make very clear what their experience will be like.
Right.
And that way there's no questions. Because as I think about this fertility process, my wife and I went through this journey ourselves. There's two key stresses that are sitting on either of your shoulders. One is this going to work? How many cycles do I have to do? And that's just overwhelming. And then there's another stress on the other shoulder, perhaps, that is about the money.
Exactly.
1 cycle, $20K, 2 cycles, $40K,
right.
3, 4, I don't know how, you never know at the beginning,
Right.
And so we're really there to alleviate that second stress.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing that we can directly do. We wish we could about the first point of stress.
Of course.
But our teams will sit down and chat over the phone as many times as really honestly as necessary to get patients comfortable with what their financial experience is going to be. Develop the right plan. From there, we actually handle a lot of the financial aspect for the patient. So we disperse or we send money directly to the clinic, to the pharmacy, to any kind of lab that might be doing genetic testing. We handle all those payments so the patient doesn't have to log into this portal and that portal and the other one to send funds, to use their credit card, et cetera. So we take all that pressure off because anyone that's gone through any kind of medical treatment and you go to any
the billing is then like a whole other trauma that you have to deal with. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, having now we have a young daughter who's 2 years old. I think for 6 or 8 months, we were still going back and forth with the hospital about just the delivery costs and stuff.
Yeah.
Just like kind of more standard costs.
Totally.
And so just getting that whole headache and that whole point of stress and all those phone calls off of the patient's plate. Let us handle that. We have direct relationships with so many clinics. And so we're able to do that in a really streamlined manner that works more effectively for the clinic, works more effectively for the patient. And it's kind of what we're specialists at. And so it allows us to do things that we're great at. It takes all that pressure off the patient. And then from there, they just simply make a loan repayment once a month for however long they choose. And we can do auto pay. Generally, that's, what most folks choose to do for their own efficiency and ours.
Yeah.
And so, from there on, we just do an auto pay for the period of their loan or the term of their loan. And that's kind of it. And then they have access to our care team for about 3 months or so. They can chat with our care team over phone, email, video, you name it, text.
Yeah.
And so that's the other half of what we do as a business.
That's really nice because sometimes all these costs, you're really unsure of what they should be and all these different medications. And it's helpful to have someone to bounce that off of that knows what everything actually should cost, to know that you're not getting overcharged by someone or, Yeah.
And what's interesting is the medication cost itself is it varies by pharmacy.
Right.
You go to 4 or 5 different pharmacies.
Totally.
And so our nurses on our care team are really in tune with the different pharmacies and their pricing and who will match pricing. And we have partnerships with pharmacies ourselves and we get discounts. And so they'll work with the patient to understand what the best scenario is in terms of pricing on meds. Is it the pharmacy that your employer may have or your employer, your prescription benefit from your employer health plan might have in their network? Or is it one that's in our network or our partnerships? And so we really work with the patient to understand what's the best scenario for them.
Right.
And it's really, it's so one-off. It's one by one. There's no obvious way to figure it out.
Right.
And so it's the expertise that our nurses have built up over years and employing that to make sure that
each individual is getting their needs met. That makes sense. So how often would you say you're finding that women are covered by their employers?
Right. So it's getting better.
It is.
I will say that. It is absolutely getting better. I mean, for many years, egg freezing or embryo freezing in, an individual couple who maybe hasn't really been trying yet was never covered. Even in, women with cancer who wanted to freeze eggs, even that wasn't covered for many years. So it is improving quite a bit. And I would say, at least in New York City, from what I'm seeing, a lot of the bigger companies, tech firms, banks, consulting firms, law firms are now offering the the benefit and not, and in a very more broad way as well, which is amazing. So things like egg freezing now are covered. Embryo banking can be covered.
Okay.
So you don't necessarily have to deem that you've had 6 months of infertility and then go through various steps of treatment that they tell you.
Right.
So I would say that is something that I'm seeing more of, which
That's
I think
hopeful.
is amazing.
Yes.
But still, I think, the bulk of people probably don't have the benefit because they don't work for some of these bigger companies that have the means to offer it. So it's still a huge, huge issue, I think, in this country is access to the care.
Especially when everybody is telling us that it's not our control, not in our control, and there's nothing we can do. And
like we should do something about it. You should freeze your eggs, but then they're not covering it.
Exactly.
So
it's
frustrating. And there is also, you don't want, I always say, we don't want the cost to be the barrier. And you also don't want the cost to be what's making you decide where to go, right?
But how can it not be if you really don't have
So we have to just,
money?
yeah, exactly. We have to find creative ways to do it. Or even in younger women, we have to prioritize. Okay, so maybe I'm going to start saving every month XYZ amount of money, or maybe I won't take that vacation that I want to take and I'm going to freeze my eggs instead. Or, I know these are not easy sacrifices you have to make, but in the long term, better. And then the other thing also is, you don't really want to cut corners here either, because there are places that can offer treatment at quote unquote discounted prices. And I would just say, for me, I call them patients. They're not consumers to me. But if you are the consumer, do the research and learn about the statistics of the place, because you may save yourself some money. But if those eggs or embryos are never going to work or the success rates are really low, then you've lost a lot of money.
Right. It's almost like you get what you pay for. Yeah. Okay. So some people may not even know that they have fertility insurance benefits. What do you think are some steps that someone can take to speak to their employer? What could they say to them just to give them some tools to speak up and empower themselves?
Yeah. I mean, I've had a lot of patients who have been actually sort of the impetus to get their employer to start covering. So, I mean, it's a hard thing to do, right? As a, woman, man, whoever you are, to go into that office and ask for the benefit.
To feel like you're worthy of it. It's hard to ask for it when no one's done it before you, because you feel like maybe I'm not worth this. But
or it's risky, or if I go ask for it,
they'll think I'm asking for too much.
Yeah, but I think nowadays it's important, and you have to be your own advocate.
I completely agree.
And it also makes sense to the extent that you can to ask a little early. The process for an employer to research the different types of fertility benefit plans that are out there and contract and deliver and all that kind of stuff, it takes time for them. And so, for example, in an egg freezing scenario, if you think you might do it next year or the year after, it's kind of lightly on your mind.
Right.
Ask early. Because you've got to give the employer a little bit of time to get stuff in a row and find the right financial package for them. And so, in a moment's notice, it's going to be pretty tough for them to, even if they want to, it's going to be tough for them to create that package or plan for you. So ask early is another key point that I would suggest.
Okay, that makes sense. But yeah, being your own advocate is so important, because no one is going to do it for us. I think the more that we speak out, the more other women will too. And that's the only way that anything is going to get done in this arena, you know?
And even think about the LGBTQI community, right?
Yeah.
They need fertility services to have a baby.
They
no matter
exactly.
They need it. They have to have it actually.
Yeah.
And so that's a whole other area, probably a whole other topic in terms of cost and discussion. So that's a whole other area too, where, advocacy within that community is making change and progress. And again, companies are starting to recognize and say, okay, you don't have to, do an IUI with donor sperm for 6 months, then say you're infertile to tap into your benefits. They're changing the language a little bit. It's slow progress, but it's happening. But a lot of change comes from those individuals who go advocate for it.
Right.
So you kind of have to speak up at some point.
100%. So what are other options for affording family planning? What other type of financing options are available besides the insurance that you have from your employer or any kind of loan? Is there anything else?
There are some nonprofits, but really kind of more specific.
Okay.
So, there's a great nonprofit that we, work with called Chick Mission. That offers,
I've heard of Chick Mission.
Yeah, so they offer grants to individuals with cancer who need the treatment. So, and then I do believe also within the LGBTQI community, there are some nonprofits that can offer some sort of grants as well. So there are some nonprofits who are offering, but again, it's hard. There's like Baby Quest, which offers grants for fertility treatment. So there are some out there that if you do the research, you can apply for and based on your circumstances may get. But obviously the demand is going to be so much more than what they're offering.
Of course. That makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have much to add to that, but I think grants are the other interesting option to go through. It's not always going to solve for the financial aspect of it. We've known people to switch employers and find an employer that has coverage.
I've heard of that too.
It's a little bit unusual to suggest that, but there are people that do that.
Or if you're thinking about a new job, make sure that you're doing your due diligence and finding one that has that. 100%.
I talk about that a lot because again, especially in New York City, I would say since the pandemic, I have seen more and more companies offering, and especially for the egg freezing, which for many years was considered elective. They didn't cover it. And I've definitely talked to a lot of patients who are potentially leaving their job and then using the benefit or looking for new ones. And I'm sort of giving them some of the names, some of the third-party payers that companies are using and different buzzwords to look for it because it I would say, given the cost that we discussed and the amount of money it could take over the course of multiple rounds, this could be like a year of your salary essentially.
Totally.
So it's something to consider when looking at a new job.
Yeah. And I think also something to consider when just thinking about savings in general. Like we save for so many things when we're at this age. We're saving for a house. We're saving for that car we want, or we're starting to save for our kids' school. And, there's so many things to save for. And I don't think that this is necessarily a bucket that people are thinking about saving for, fertility. And unfortunately, I think that it is something that we have to be more on top of. Like you said, unfortunately, that vacation or whatever it is, I mean, every person decides personally what they can sacrifice. But I know for me, I'm dealing with fertility issues right now at 38 years old. And I don't know whether if I had frozen eggs in my 20s, if that would have made a difference. But just the thought of wondering is I wish I would have done that. And I could have. And I think that, it's like an insurance in and of itself. Yeah.
But also egg freezing too. Like I say this to my patients all the time, don't have that guilt because it really wasn't spoken of. 10 years ago, we weren't talking about it.
Very
it was
true.
Still it was experimental until 10 years ago, right?
No,
you're
right.
I think so you don't feel guilty
it's
because
easy to think that way.
I'm going to tell
you
10 years ago, I did not have 28-year-olds coming in to freeze their eggs unless they had cancer. It just wasn't a thing.
So interesting.
But it's totally different now because the freeze technology is so good.
It's so good. Yeah. And we're just becoming more aware. And I think that women are getting pregnant later. I don't know if you found this, but I feel like women are getting pregnant later and maybe are just more stressed. And sometimes I think that's why there have been more infertility issues.
No, absolutely.
But for the people who cannot afford the cost of fertility journeys, what are ways that we can all help? I know you mentioned some of the nonprofits, but is there anything that we can do with the government or anything else that we can do to help this financial situation with infertility?
I would certainly suggest every state has its own policy or lack thereof around mandates for coverage from an insurance perspective. New York State is one that does have a mandate, but it's limited and narrow in scope in some regards, but still probably one of the broader mandates in this country.
Okay.
Reaching out to your elected officials is a good way to go about elevating this issue to make sure it's something that's on the mind of the folks that represent us. When that's kind of in the state house and in our local state governments, et cetera.
Yeah. Talking about it.
Yeah.
Saving, making thinking about it as a priority. But also, just supporting one another.
Right.
And I think for me, it's being vulnerable and open about my experience has, I think, just made people feel less alone. And even that can manifest people's energy into doing something about this, just starting a conversation has so much power.
Yeah. For a long time, there wasn't much of a public conversation just about fertility treatment. And so that's opening up, and things like this are continuing to make that better.
Right.
Make it more of a topic of conversation that folks can have with their friends or learn from their friends, other folks who've been, through the process. But then the other thing people don't talk about is the cost of this.
Right.
So maybe folks are starting to talk about fertility treatment more, and it's becoming more of a news topic. But the thing that's not a news topic right now is the cost of it.
Nobody does. When we were starting to look into surrogacy, I had no idea, and people were so tight-lipped about it.
Yeah.
And people, it's one of those things where it's like everybody wants to know and nobody cares, but people just don't want to say.
Yeah.
Like I could even see when you were answering some of the questions of the cost, it was like sort of hard to even say because some of them are, it's so much that it's
money,
like I can't even.
I know.
But what is happening is so valuable and so intricate and so detail oriented. And so it has that cost to it. But one day there will be universal coverage. Maybe.
We could just keep pushing for it.
Right? Yeah. All right. So how can we all find out more about CCRM?
So we are like a nationwide clinic. We have some clinics in Canada as well, but definitely go to our website, read about us, see where our locations are, social media as well. But again, we're all over the country now, and we are really sort of known for our lab, the quality of our lab. Again, when looking for your fertility partner, there's two components. It's the embryology, the people handling the eggs, the sperm, the embryos, and then it's your physician and the team there. And so, we really try to take pride in, kind of being the best of both worlds, having that quality lab, but also having that personalized care doctors and nurses that you can be in touch with. And, I say I'm only as good as my lab is. So, I feel really fortunate to work with this lab that has really been sort of on the forefront of the technology for the past several decades. Actually, the freeze technology a lot. They were very instrumental in developing. So
amazing. Yeah, I wish I would have known about you guys during my whole journey. But it's been, so cool to meet so many different doctors from your team. Right. And
we are the USA, and there's amazing fertility care here.
So, true. But
so that's great. We have a lot of, good colleagues at other places as well with good labs as well. So.
And then how can we hear more about your company?
Yeah, you can just visit us, futurefamily.com. And just start an application. Again, it takes 90 seconds. It's very easy to get in touch with our team members just to understand what the process is like, how we partner with different clinics, and how we can make the journey a little less stressful than it kind of naturally is going to be.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you guys so much for coming in. Thank you for coming in from New York.
Yeah, of course.
Appreciate it.
It's an important topic.
No, it is an important topic. And
conversation.
sometimes I think the financial stuff, like I said, it can be a little bit like,
it's uncomfortable
and people don't
because,
really know, but you have to have the conversations or else without the information, you don't have any power.
The longer you go without thinking about the financial aspect of it, the more difficult it becomes.
That's also true. Then you're just in denial.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, so start
save
planning.
early, ask early, plan early. Yeah, it's just getting out ahead of it.
Yeah,
it
looking for jobs,
way.
asking your employer when you're out there looking at jobs or debating two different companies. It's all important things to start thinking about.
Yeah, or making sure if you're a founder that's listening that this is something that you offer.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much.
Absolutely.
Thank
Pleasure.
you.